everyone, welcome back to my channel for a brand new mystery with Mollie. If you are new around here, if you've never seen my face on your screen before, then hi, my name is Mollie and I post true crime videos like this every single week. So if you think that that is something that you might want to stick around for, then please do subscribe and don't forget to switch on the little notification bell so that YouTube will let you know whenever I post a new video. This week we are going to be talking about a solved case from Illinois/Wisconsin. In the summer of 2012, a young university student was looking forward to her future. She was just about to graduate with an incredible degree, and she was also expecting. She was a mother-to-be, and she couldn't wait for her baby to arrive. But tragically, graduation and parenthood were two major events in her life that she would never get to see, as she was brutally murdered just a couple of months before her due date. And would you believe it, before the police even became aware of this horrific crime, her killer literally handed himself in immediately. He straight away confessed to what he had done, but then in a shocking turn of events, when it came to his trial, he actually decided to plead not guilty. And just wait till you hear what his defense argument was during his court proceedings. I promise it's guaranteed to make your blood boil, as it made mine whilst I was researching this case. Let's delve into the tragic story of Alicia Bromfield. But quickly, before we get into the case, I would just like to say a big thank you to Enquiries for very kindly sponsoring this section of the video. Enquiries is an incredible service that helps to keep you safe online and protect your privacy by basically going to data brokers and requesting that your personal data be removed from their databases. You know, we're living in a time where pretty much everyone has and is using social media every single day. We all use Google, and unfortunately these can actually present data brokers with easy access to collect your private information, such as your name, your date of birth, your phone number, address, IP information, details about your relatives, your employment history. The list goes on and on. Every single year, both the number and scope of data breaches are rising all over the world, and the chances of your own data getting breached is constantly rising too. And without your knowledge, data brokers will sell your personal information to companies and businesses, and they could even fall into the hands of cyber criminals. To sum up, the internet can be a pretty terrifying place, but luckily Enquiries is available to help you feel so much more at ease. Enquiries has an automated process where they can contact data brokers on your behalf and request that they remove your personal information from their records. They save you the hassle of having to do all of this yourself. I mean, if you were to do this yourself, it would probably take you years and years to do. So Enquiries just takes away that stress. All you have to do is create an account, grant them the right to work for you, and they will immediately get to work, and they'll even keep you updated on their progress along the way. For me, Enquiries is just a godsend because obviously my job is within social media, so I'm on it, I'm online and using the internet every single day, and I cannot tell you how much more relaxed I felt since I've been using their service, knowing that Enquiries are helping to protect my personal data and private information. I highly recommend them. So if you would like to check out Enquiries for yourself, then you can find a link to their website at the top line of the description box, and if you use the code Mollie Westbrook, you will be able to get an exclusive 60% off an annual Enquiries plan, which is an incredibly generous offer. Again, that's the code Mollie Westbrook for 60% off. Thank you once again to Enquiries for sponsoring this video and supporting the channel. Thank you so much to all of you guys watching for always showing your support to the sponsors that we work with on this channel. And now let's just get into the case. But just before we continue, please listen carefully to the following. This video contains heavy themes such as rape and sexual assault, necrophilia, sexual harassment, blackmail, suicide, and fetal death. Viewer discretion is advised. So for this week's case, we are going back more than 12 years ago now to August of 2012 in Plainfield, which is a village in Will and Kendall counties in the state of Illinois in the US. And this is Alicia Bromfield. She was a 21-year-old woman who lived in Plainfield. Alicia was born on the 28th of August 1990 in a city called Joliet in Illinois, which is just under 10 miles away from Plainfield, so I believe she had lived in Illinois her whole life. Her father's name was James, her mother's name was Sherry, and Alicia also had a stepfather named Joe and a stepmother named Amy too. And Alicia was one of 5 children. She had 3 brothers named Luke, Chase, and Colton, and a sister named Brianna. Now, I couldn't really find much information online about Alicia's childhood, so as far as I'm aware, she had a nice normal upbringing, and she was described described by her mother Sherry as always being just such a fun person. Alicia was always up for a laugh, always cracking jokes. She just never took life very seriously. She was a joy to be around. Doesn't seem like you could ever really be bored when you were around Alicia. She was so full of life. She was also said to have been very loving and generous. She was a giver in life. Sherry said that Alicia was always willing to help anyone. She was always there for everyone. She was clearly just a very kind-hearted young woman. By the time this case took place, Alicia was a student. She was a student at the Western Illinois University. In fact, she was just a couple of months away from graduating with a degree in criminal justice and forensic psychology. That was her dream career. She wanted a job working in forensic psychology. So, I mean, clearly she was also an incredibly intelligent young woman. So yeah, she was very excited to pursue that following her graduation. And Alicia was also filled with a lot of excitement at the time that this case took place because she was expecting. She was a mother-to-be. She was actually nearing the end of her second trimester. She was 6.5 months pregnant. Now, I couldn't actually find the name of the father of her baby online because he wasn't going to be in the picture at all. He was someone that she knew from college, I think, and he had apparently decided that he didn't want anything to do with Alicia or the baby. He didn't want to be involved. And so Alicia was going to be raising her child on her own. She was going to be a single mother, which, you know, I can imagine was very, very daunting for her. I think it would be daunting for any woman knowing that they were going to be responsible for bringing up a child completely on their own. Well, I say on her own, but of course Alicia did have a good support system around her. She had friends, she had her family. She did have people who were going to be able to help her along the way. But also Alicia was ready. She was ready for single motherhood. As nerve-wracking as it was, she was equally just so excited and over the moon. She couldn't wait to be a mum. She couldn't wait to meet her little baby. Her baby girl, she had found out the sex. She was going to be having a daughter, and she'd even already picked out the name. She planned to name her little girl Ava Lucille, who would be making her arrival, I believe in late 2012 she was due. And by 6.5 months pregnant, Alicia was in full mum preparation mode. She obviously knew that money would be tight given the fact that she only had one income, her income, to support her and her daughter. And so she had been planning ahead throughout her pregnancy so far. She was using whatever extra money she had to buy baby clothes and other things that she would need for when Ava was born, like bottles and nappies or diapers, all those kinds of things, I would imagine. It just made sense to obviously kind of buy all of these things little by little rather than in one go, having that big expense of buying everything that she needed at once. So yeah, she was collecting all of the baby stuff that she was going to need, and she also felt very lucky in regards to the fact that she was going to be having income coming in each month, even when she would be on maternity leave. Basically, Alicia worked for a Home Depot retail store in Illinois. Well, she actually worked for one of the Home Depot garden centers. It was called Grand Flowers, and she worked as a florist. She worked in the garden department, and they provided flowers to Home Depot. And she'd been an employee there for a number of years, about 6 years in total, I think. She was just a teenager when she started working for the garden department in 2006, and yeah, by 2012 she was still working there, and she really liked this job because it was seasonal, but she would still be paid in the winter, which I mean was perfect for her current situation. Obviously her baby Ava would be arriving in late 2012 in the winter, and her job meant that she would have the time off to spend with her newborn, but she would still have that income coming in to support her and the baby. So it was great. Life seemed to be heading in a really positive direction for 21-year-old Alicia Bromfield. She had so many exciting things to look forward to, from graduating with her degrees in a couple of months' time to welcoming her little baby girl into the world, and she was so happy, so content. But as it would turn out, she would never get to see these milestones, never get to see these monumental events in her life, because in the summer of 2012 she became the victim of a truly horrific crime when a man called 911 reporting a murder. The date was the 19th of August 2012. It was a Sunday, and that Sunday morning a 36-year-old man walked into a gas station in Door County in Wisconsin, which is just under a 5-hour drive away from Plainfield in Illinois. Anyway, this man walked into a gas station and he approached the gas station clerk behind the counter. He was dripping wet for some reason. His clothes were soaked, and he asked the gas station station clerk if he could use their phone. He needed to use it to call 911 and report an emergency. And so the clerk, probably really confused, said, yeah, okay, she called 911 for this man, and when an operator answered, she passed the phone over to him to speak. And it was then when this man in the dripping wet clothes said, quote, "I'd like to report a murder, please." So obviously slightly stunned, the operator replied, "You know for sure that a murder occurred?" And the man said yes. And when asked who committed this murder, the man on the phone said, "I did." He admitted killing a young woman in his hotel room the previous night in Door County. And when asked if it was some kind of accident, he responded calmly as ever, "It was intentional." Following this, the operator said, "It was intentional? Okay, well, you're doing the right thing. I'm glad you called me." To which he replied, "I'm a good person besides what I did last night. Alicia's family is going to flip. Everyone is going to flip." As I'm sure you've probably pieced together by now, Alicia Bromfield was the young woman who had been killed. Her murder was what this man was reporting. But who on earth was he? Who was this mysterious man that was soaking wet in the gas station, and why was Alicia in Door County in Wisconsin when we know that she was obviously from Plainfield in Illinois? What were the events that led to this happening? Well, before we get into that, let's firstly delve into who this man was. Alicia's killer, it seems. His name was Brian Cooper. As I said, he was 36 years old, so 15 years older than Alicia. He was also from Plainfield, and as it would turn out, he was actually Alicia's boss. As we know, she worked for a florist who provided flowers for Home Depot, and Brian Cooper was her supervisor there. He was the regional manager, and they'd worked together for about 5 years by this point. However, Brian Cooper was an incredibly abusive and manipulative boss who had been essentially blackmailing and trying to take advantage of Alicia for a very long time. But I mean, things didn't start out like that. When Alicia and Brian first started working together at the garden centre, she thought that he seemed really nice and friendly at first. They got along really well, and they quickly became very good friends. However, it became clear, I think pretty quickly, that Brian Cooper liked Alicia as more than just a friend. He took a sexual/romantic interest in her, despite the fact that he was 15 years her senior. And as I said, Alicia was literally just a teenager when she started working at Home Depot and with Brian. He was a fully grown adult man, and he'd taken an interest in a teenage girl. And he would make this very obvious. He started making advances towards Alicia. He would make inappropriate comments to her. And apparently he even started introducing Alicia as his girlfriend to people. And she wasn't. She never was. As far as anyone knows, they were never in any kind of romantic relationship, because Alicia didn't like Brian like that. But that didn't stop Brian from lying and telling people that they were. He was completely delusional. And he would use his position at Home Depot, he would use his power and authority over Alicia as her superior, her supervisor, to intimidate her and constantly try and control pretty much every aspect of her life, also to get closer to her. So for example, he started just calling and texting her all the time outside of work, and he would try to make out like he needed to speak to her about something work related, but I mean it wasn't. He just wanted to talk to her all the time, find out who she was with, what she was doing. He would always try to see her and meet up with her outside of work, even asking if she could walk his dog for him on occasion so that he could get her over to his house. He would become extremely jealous if he saw Alicia, I think, just interacting with another male employee. In fact, according to one report, there were even a few occasions where he literally said that she couldn't have a lunch break if he found out that she intended to spend her lunch break with a man. He made it very, very clear that he was attracted to Alicia, that he wanted her. But Alicia never reciprocated these feelings. She would constantly rebuff his advances and reject him. But I can only imagine how difficult this incredibly inappropriate situation must have been for her to try and navigate, and at such a young young age as well. You know, like I said, she wasn't interested in Brian Cooper at all. I would imagine that she was probably quite repulsed by his behaviour towards her, to be honest. In her mind, she was probably thinking, what on earth can I do about this? This man was essentially sexually harassing her in the workplace, but at the end of the day, he was her boss. He had that control over whether she had a job or didn't, whether she had an income or didn't. He could fire her at the drop of a hat if he wanted to and make up some crap excuse to head office as to why. So I think whilst Alicia tried to make it as clear as possible to Brian that, you know, she did not reciprocate his feelings, she didn't feel the same, I don't think she kind of outright stood up to him and said, look, this is out of order, leave me alone. Not initially anyway. She probably tried to just keep the peace as much as possible and let him down gently so that she could keep things somewhat friendly in the workplace, and more importantly, so that she could keep her job. She was happy to be friends with Brian Cooper, but that was it. Their relationship wasn't going to be anything more than that. But it would appear as though this just made Brian Cooper angry. He was angry that Alicia clearly didn't feel the same way that he did and would constantly, I guess, turn him down, so much so that he started verbally abusing her at work. He would shout at her and swear at her. He would even call her horrible names like bitch and slut. He'd called her a whore. Apparently that was when she asked if she could have the day off of work once. He got angry and called her a whore because he always wanted her to be in work, and he would even call her these names in front of customers. He literally didn't care. And the worst part about all of this is the fact that the higher-ups in the company, I suppose, Cooper's superiors, they knew about this. According to court documents, Alicia filed complaints about Brian Cooper and his inappropriate behaviour towards her on numerous occasions over the years that she worked there. Apparently one of the managers literally witnessed Alicia burst into tears after one of the times when Cooper refused to let her have a lunch break. On another occasion, she told her group leader that she didn't want to be left alone with him. She clearly didn't feel safe being left alone with him. She alerted the other supervisors and managers about the misconduct in the workplace several times, and nothing was done. He wasn't fired or even like suspended or anything. Apparently all his bosses really did was ask Brian Cooper to take an anger management course, because as well as verbally abusing Alicia, it's been reported that Brian would also literally throw things and slam things at work when she did something that made him angry. So yeah, they asked him to do an anger management course, but he never actually completed it, and they didn't even bother to check that he had completed it either. They didn't even remove Brian Cooper as Alicia's supervisor. The least they could have done, in my opinion, is removed him from having any power or authority over Alicia. They could have made someone else her supervisor, because she'd made clear just how unprofessional he was and how uncomfortable she felt around him. But no, they didn't even do that, which is just unbelievable. It just breaks my heart as well that Alicia must have felt so alone. She'd literally asked the other supervisors and managers for help because of how uncomfortable Cooper made her feel, and she was just ignored, essentially. It's so disappointing. So yeah, the abuse and sexual harassment of Alicia at the hands of Brian Cooper just continued. Again, I think Alicia tried to keep it friendly and keep the peace as much as she possibly could. She tried to stay in Brian's good books, I suppose, as an employee, but he just continued to take advantage and blackmail her. He would even blackmail her into coming on business trips with him. I think he would tell her that it was part of the job. It was a requirement for her to go on these business trips, but of course it wasn't. It was because he just wanted to spend as much time with her as possible. And apparently when Alicia would express to Brian that she didn't want to go on these work trips, he would threaten to either cut her hours or just fire her. She would be sacked. And in fact, that is exactly what led to Alicia ending up in Wisconsin with Brian Cooper. He once again pressured her into coming on a trip with him in August of 2012. Although although this time it wasn't actually a work-related trip. He wanted Alicia to accompany him to his sister's wedding, of all places, of all events. His sister was getting married in Wisconsin and he was due to be walking her down the aisle, and he wanted Alicia to come as his date. But he assured Alicia that they would just be going as friends, nothing more. And once again, Alicia kind of felt like she was in this huge predicament. She didn't want to go, but Brian had threatened to cut her hours and sack her many times before, and she was terrified that if she said no, he would do just that. She would lose her job, and quite simply, she couldn't take that risk, especially now that she was expecting. As we know, she was 6.5 months pregnant, and she was banking on the fact that obviously her baby girl Ava was due to arrive in late 2012. She was due in the winter time, and her job was seasonal, and she would get winters off with pay, with that money still coming in every single month. And she needed that. She was going to be a single mother. She only had one income to provide for her child. She could not afford to lose her job. She couldn't afford to tell her boss, Brian Cooper, no. And so very reluctantly, she said yes. She agreed to attend his sister's wedding as his +1. Who knows, maybe in Alicia's head, she was even thinking, okay, well, maybe if I do this for him, if I grant him this favor of being his +1 as a friend, maybe he'll go easier on me at work and he'll stop with the inappropriate behavior. Remember, she was just 21 years old. Again, I couldn't imagine trying to navigate a situation like this at work, and I'm 25 years old, let alone if I was 21. So anyway, on the 18th of August 2012, Brian and Alicia left Plainfield in Illinois, and they made the 4+ hour trip to Door County in Wisconsin, where his sister's wedding was taking place. Alicia had told her mother Sherry that they would be attending the wedding and that they would be returning to Plainfield the next morning. She was expecting it to be just a quick trip. However, as we know, Alicia never made it back to Plainfield. It was on the morning of the 19th of August 2012 when Brian Cooper walked into that gas station in Door County, and he asked the clerk if he could use their phone to call 911 and report a murder that he had just committed. The murder of his employee, Alicia Bromfield. Following this phone call, armed police officers were immediately dispatched to that gas station. They ordered Brian Cooper to get down on the ground, and he was arrested and taken into custody for questioning. Meanwhile, other officers were sent to the hotel that Alicia and Brian were staying in whilst they were in Door County. Brian had booked them a room at this resort in Door County called the Sand Bay Beach Resort. He'd actually lied to Alicia before the trip and claimed that the whole wedding party was staying in this resort together, which initially made Alicia feel a bit more at ease, a bit more comfortable about going on this trip, but that was a lie. He'd lied. It was in fact just him and Alicia staying at the resort, and he didn't even book them separate rooms. He had them share a room with 2 separate beds, I think. But anyway, officers were dispatched to the resort. They went into Brian and Alicia's room, and sure enough, they discovered the body of 21-year-old Alicia Bromfield, and she was dead, as was her unborn baby, Ava Lucille. As a result of her mum's murder, Ava had died in the womb too. They walked into the room, and the first thing that detectives saw was, of course, Alicia. She was lying, I think, on her back on the floor. A pillow had been placed underneath her head, and she was partially covered with a blanket, although underneath the blanket she was naked. And when police took a closer look at her body, they observed that she had quite a lot of injuries. She had self-defense injuries from where she had tried to fight back, scratch marks, she was covered in bruises. It was clear that there had been a very violent struggle between Alicia and Brian. She tried so incredibly hard to fight for her life. So forensics were sent in to obviously examine the scene further, take photographs, collect any evidence, and in the meantime, Brian Cooper's interview was taking place at the police station. He'd obviously already confessed that he was responsible for Alicia's death, so the detectives needed to know exactly what happened, how he killed her, and what led to him even deciding to kill her in the first place. Brian Cooper was interviewed by investigator Mark Winkle with the Door County Sheriff's Office, and yeah, he sat down with Brian and he asked him for his account of Alicia's murder and the events leading up to her murder. So let's talk about that. Let's delve into his story. So Cooper explained explained that he and Alicia were obviously in Door County because it was his sister's wedding. He was walking her down the aisle and Alicia was his +1, and he actually claimed in his interview that he and Alicia were together. Well, in his words, he said that they were, quote, co-workers and somewhat dating, which again, just want to reiterate, they were not. He just liked to lie and say that they were dating to people. Alicia's best friend Olivia said in a True Crime Daily documentary that I watched about this case that Alicia had never, ever expressed any romantic or sexual interest in her supervisor, Brian Cooper. She never mentioned that they were dating or had dated in the past, and you'd think of all people, she would tell her best friend if they were, but she never had. So yeah, it was clear that that was a lie. But Brian did go on to say that he'd always wanted to be in a relationship with Alicia. He'd always wanted her to be his girlfriend, but he claimed that because she was pregnant, he'd been kind of trying to back off a bit to be respectful of her. Again, what a load of crap. It baffles me how his idea of being respectful of her and her pregnancy involves continually sexually harassing her at work and blackmailing her and manipulating her into doing things that she didn't want to do so that she could keep her job, but I digress. Now, Brian said that once they arrived in Door County and before his sister's wedding, he and Alicia actually got into this huge argument. I'm not entirely sure what this argument was about, whether it was about the fact that Alicia realised that he'd lied about the whole wedding party was staying in the same resort when they weren't thing, or perhaps the fact that he hadn't booked them 2 separate rooms, I don't know. But they had this big argument, and actually Alicia was so angry that she decided she wasn't going to go to the wedding anymore. And she even sent a text message to her mum Sherry saying that she was coming straight home, that she and Brian had gotten into a fight and that she was going to come home. However, it seemed as though Brian and Alicia had somewhat resolved this argument, because just a couple of hours later, Alicia texted her mum again saying that she had decided to stay now. She'd agreed to still go to the wedding and that she was going to come home the following morning as originally planned. But Brian said in his interview that although Alicia agreed to still attend the wedding, she said to Brian that once they got back home, once they returned to Plainfield, that was it. She was done with him. She'd put up with his abusive behaviour and sexual harassment at work for so long, and she was done. She was no longer going to be even his friend anymore when they got back. So they went to the wedding where pictures of them were taken. Alicia was smiling in these pictures, so it's clear that she was just trying to put on a smile, fake a smile, just to get through the day, because this was going to be the last favour that she was ever going to do for Brian Cooper. They went to the wedding, they attended the after party, I guess the evening do, and then they returned to their hotel room at the resort shortly after midnight, so in the early hours of the morning on the 19th of August. And Brian said that when they got back, Alicia just got straight into bed. She just wanted to go straight to bed so that she could wake up in the morning and go straight home. But Brian Cooper did not go to sleep. He continued drinking. He'd been drinking alcohol all throughout the wedding evening do, and he carried on drinking when he got back to the hotel room. And he said that as Alicia was sleeping, he was just kind of, I guess, pacing around the hotel room. He was walking around, drinking, smoking cigarettes, and as he did so, this rage was just building and building inside of him, because he was so angry at Alicia. So angry that she had just decided that they were not going to have any kind of relationship anymore. He was infuriated. In his mind, it was like he was thinking, how dare you? How dare you make this decision that we aren't going to be even friends anymore or have any kind of relationship? Because he wasn't used to that, was he? He wasn't used to Alicia having the control, because he'd always had the power and control over her in the workplace, being her supervisor. He'd always had the authority. So the fact that now Alicia was putting her foot down and saying, actually, no, enough. I've had enough of the way you've been treating me, how unprofessional you've been, how uncomfortable you make me, and I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not being your friend. She'd made it clear that she was not standing for this treatment any longer, and he was furious because he didn't want to lose her and he didn't want to lose that control. And so he decided that he was going to hurt Alicia. He was that angry that he was going to hurt her. In Brian's words, he said in his interview, quote, "I was debating what I was doing and I was doing some prepping. I'm like thinking about harming her." Brian said that he thought about trying to tie Alicia up while she was asleep, trying to restrain her with these electrical cords, I think. However, he quickly decided against that because apparently Alicia kept moving in her sleep, so he realized that it would just be too tricky. If he tried to restrain her with these cords, she would probably wake up. And eventually, I think maybe after a couple of hours, Alicia did wake up. She started to stir. And when she woke, apparently Brian asked her if she wanted to watch a movie with him when they got back to Plainfield the following day, but Alicia said no. She was sticking to her word that that was it. There was not going to be a friendship between them when they got back home. And this just made Brian snap. After Alicia said this, he flew into an even deeper rage and he immediately attacked. He described how he literally jumped on top of Alicia on the bed. He straddled her, put his hands around her neck and started to squeeze. So of course, petrified and panicked, Alicia began trying to fight with Brian, trying to get him off of her, and she was pleading with him not to kill her because of the baby. She started shouting, "Think of the baby and don't do it to me because of the baby," which is just one of the most heart-shattering things that I think I've ever heard. That really brought me to tears when I was researching this case. The fact that in her final moments, she wasn't even thinking about her own life. All she was thinking about was saving the life of her unborn baby Ava. But Brian Cooper didn't care. He even said, quote, "At that moment, I didn't care." And he continued with the attack, continued trying to strangle Alicia. He said that at one point during the struggle, they actually fell off of the bed after Alicia managed to bite down on one of his fingers. So they fell off the bed and onto the floor. Brian managed to get back on top of Alicia to hold her down, and he continued to strangle her. He strangled her until she was dead. And instead of calling an ambulance to see if maybe paramedics could at least save Alicia's unborn baby Ava, Brian Cooper decided that he was going to sexually assault Alicia's corpse. He removed her clothing and committed necrophilia. He raped her dead body on the floor of that hotel room. He said in his interview, quote, "I just wanted to see her naked, I guess." And then after he had finished, after the rape, he covered Alicia's nude body with a blanket. He put a pillow under her head, and then he decided that he was actually going to try and take his own life too. He clearly didn't want to face the consequences of his actions. He didn't want to be arrested and go to prison and have to face everyone finding out what he had done, and so he decided to kill himself. But obviously he wasn't successful. He said that he tried to kill himself with a knife and a corkscrew, but it didn't work, and so he just went to bed. He actually slept in the bathroom, in the bathtub, and then when he woke up later that morning, he attempted to commit suicide again. He left the hotel and attempted to drown himself in this local bay, but once again he failed, and that is why he was so wet, why he was dripping with water when he walked into that gas station. From the bay, he drove to the gas station, and we know what happened after that. He called 911 and confessed that he had just carried out a murder. So that was Brian Cooper's story. Now, after he gave this account, Detective Winkle did ask him if he had ever hurt anyone else. Did he have any more victims? And Cooper actually said yes. He said that he'd never killed anyone else before, but he admitted that he was abusive towards an ex-girlfriend of his. He confessed that one time during an argument where he, quote, couldn't get through to her, he tied her up so that he could talk to her. Although he never actually faced any punishment for this, he was never arrested because she didn't go to the police. Who knows, she was probably too terrified going to the police, thinking, what would he do to her if she did report this? Following the discovery of Alicia's body, of course, her family were quickly informed of the tragic news that not only was she dead, but that her baby was dead too. And Brian Cooper was charged. He was charged with both third-degree sexual assault and 2 counts of intentional homicide. Obviously, 1 count for Alicia's death, the other for the death of her baby Ava. As he awaited his court proceedings, of course, the police continued with building their case against him, and they were able to collect a lot of evidence. Not only did they have his detailed confession on tape, but also they had the evidence of the fact that Brian had been abusing and sexually harassing Alicia at work work and outside of work for a number of years now, and they even found additional evidence on his computer. Incredibly disturbing evidence. You see, on his computer, they discovered several videos that Brian had recorded of Alicia himself without her knowledge. Videos which just further highlighted not only his obsession with Alicia, but highlighted just how sick and twisted and perverted this man truly was. Do you remember earlier we talked about how occasionally Alicia would walk Brian Cooper's dog for him? Well, police found that Brian had been secretly recording her while she was in his house picking up and dropping off the dog. He was filming her while she was in the bathroom. He had hidden a secret camera in his bathroom. I think he placed this camera behind a shelf, and then he drilled a tiny hole in the shelf for the lens to poke through, I guess. And this camera was positioned directly in front of his toilet seat. So he would record videos of Alicia using the toilet and then just keep them to watch over and over again. But that wasn't all. Again, without her knowledge, Cooper had also been secretly recording Alicia in the resort in Door County too, obviously before her murder. Again, he set up a hidden camera in the bin in the bathroom, and in one of the videos, he was able to capture her as she was naked getting out of the shower. I believe I also read that the police discovered that Brian Cooper's password to his mobile phone was Alicia's birthday. Again, just further highlighting his obsession and infatuation with her. So yeah, the police had a lot of evidence, a very solid case against Brian Cooper, and yet, would you believe it, when it came to his plea hearing, he actually decided to plead not guilty. He'd literally already confessed to Alicia's murder, and yet he was now pleading not guilty. But he wasn't denying that he was the perpetrator. He was still admitting that yes, he was the one who caused Alicia's death. However, he pleaded not guilty by reason of voluntary intoxication, which is a defense tactic that I hadn't actually heard of before this case, but when I tell you that learning about it made me seethe, it made me want to scream, quite honestly, and chuck my laptop out of the window. Get a load of this. So the defense's argument during the trial was that Brian Cooper could not be held responsible for his actions that night, could not be held responsible for Alicia's death or the death of her unborn baby, because he was so drunk from all of the alcohol that he had consumed following his sister's wedding that he didn't even really know what he was doing, and therefore he couldn't form the criminal intent necessary to commit this crime. Honestly, I try my best to refrain from swearing in my videos, but what the fuck? It's disgusting. I'm so disgusted by this defense tactic. The fact that they were trying to excuse this man's actions by removing the blame from him and placing it on alcohol that he was willingly piling into his body is just vile beyond words. I think it's despicable and shameful, to be quite honest. But alas, that was their tactic. That was the defense's argument during Brian Cooper's trial, that he was so intoxicated that Alicia's death essentially wasn't his fault, which of course the police and the prosecution just knew was a load of crap. Firstly, I mean, once again, using alcohol as a justification for murder, double murder, is just disgusting. But secondly, they were just like, well, hang on a minute, let's rewind for a second. If Brian Cooper was so very drunk that he was all over the place and he didn't really know what he was doing, then how on earth was he able to recall every last detail of the murder in his first interview with Detective Winkle? He was able to tell the police everything from the argument that he and Alicia had prior to the murder, to how he thought about tying her up with electrical cord, how he jumped on Alicia and fought with her on the bed, to rolling off the bed and strangling her to death on the floor, to raping her corpse and covering her with a blanket. He went through this crime with the detectives in thorough detail. So how does that fit with the defense's version of events? It doesn't. If he was so drunk that he couldn't control himself and he was just out of it, then how was he able to relay all of these specific aspects of the crime, you know? You'd think that if he was that drunk, then he barely would have remembered anything. But also, let's not forget the fact that in his confession, he admitted that this crime was planned. As I said, the voluntary intoxication defense essentially means that the amount of alcohol that the accused used, consumed, prevents them from forming criminal intent. But Brian literally said in his confession, quote, "I was debating what I was doing and I was doing some prepping. I'm like thinking about harming her." That literally proves premeditation, no? Well, would you believe it? It seems as though the jury just couldn't decide. Unbelievably, Brian Cooper's trial for murder ended in a hung jury of 10-2. The jury members could not agree on whether or not to find Cooper guilty or not guilty, which is just baffling. As you can imagine, the prosecution was stunned with this result. The police were stunned. They thought that they had a rock-solid case. Alicia's family was stunned. But what shocked and upset Alicia's mother, Sherry, the most was the fact that the two jury members who believed Cooper's defense, who believed that he was not guilty because of voluntary intoxication, were two women. Two women on that jury decided that this man should not be held accountable for the killing of an innocent young woman and her unborn baby simply because he was drunk. Now, Brian Cooper was found guilty and he was convicted of the third-degree sexual assault charge, but the hung jury on the murder charges meant that he would have to go to trial again for those. But whilst Alicia's mother waited for the second trial of her daughter's killer to come around, she decided that she couldn't just wait. She was so disgusted over the whole voluntary intoxication defense, disgusted by the fact that that was even a defense strategy that was allowed in the US court system during a trial for murder, that she decided that she had to do something about it because she didn't want any other family to have to go through this pain, to have to go through the pain of witnessing their loved one's killer trying to blame alcohol for their homicide during a court case. And so she sprung into action. Sherry started campaigning alongside Alicia's other family members and friends to get this legal strategy banned, essentially banned as a defense tactic. They started just trying to, I think, spread the word, raise awareness of what they were campaigning for as much as possible. They wrote letters, made online petitions, had meetings with legislators in Wisconsin, and thankfully all of their hard work paid off. I believe it was in April of 2014, so just under 2 years after Alicia's murder, when Governor Scott Walker signed a bill that officially banished the voluntary intoxication defense from Wisconsin law. And as a result, it wasn't just banned in Wisconsin, actually. The defense strategy was eventually banned in 32 other states as well, all thanks to Sherry and her family, which is just incredible and such a relief. But unfortunately, as it would turn out, despite this bill being signed in Wisconsin to banish the defense, it wouldn't actually apply when it would come to Brian Cooper's second trial. As we know, he had to go to trial again for the murder charges because of the hung jury. I believe his second trial took place in May of 2014. And from what I can gather, because Alicia's murder took place obviously before the bill was signed, that meant that Brian Cooper's defense team could still use it as their defense at his second trial, despite the fact that it had technically already been banished by then. So he went to trial again in the spring of 2014. Like I said, he once again used the whole "I was so drunk I couldn't help myself, I can't be held accountable" excuse. But luckily, this time, the second jury did see it as just that, an excuse, not a justification. And so at the end of his trial, after just 1 hour of deliberation, he was found guilty of the first-degree murder of Alicia Bromfield and the first-degree murder of her unborn baby, Ava Lucille. And as a result, he received 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole, so it's more than likely that he will die behind bars, thank God. In the aftermath of her daughter's murder, Alicia's mother, Sherry, once again sprung into action in a couple of different ways. Firstly, she actually filed a lawsuit against Home Depot, the employers of obviously both Brian Cooper and Alicia Bromfield, as it was actually discovered that not only did Brian's employers know about his abuse and sexual harassment towards Alicia in the workplace, but in fact other female co-workers of his had also filed complaints about him, about his inappropriate behaviour towards them, I believe even before Alicia started working there, or at least before he turned his attention towards Alicia. For example, there was one former Home Depot employee named Jessica. She, I think, had just graduated from high school when she first started at Home Depot, so she was very, very young, and just like he had done with Alicia, Brian Cooper, this much older man, took an inappropriate sexual interest in her, and he would make that very obvious at work. According to court documents, he would tell people that Jessica was his girlfriend, and he would shout and swear at her at work. Again, much of the same behaviour that he exhibited towards Alicia. He would make comments about his genitals to Jessica, and apparently he would even, quote, rub himself against her, so sexually assault her. And just like Alicia had done, Jessica also went to her group leader about this, about how uncomfortable she felt around Brian, but nothing was really done. He wasn't sacked, and so Jessica, feeling like she had no other option, actually decided to quit herself. She left that job because of Brian Cooper. So Sherry filed a lawsuit against Home Depot, claiming that their negligence essentially led to her daughter's murder. Because if they had done the right thing, if they had acted to keep the female employees of their store safe from Brian Cooper by firing him, then she believes her daughter wouldn't have been murdered. Now, from what I can gather, initially Sherry's lawsuit was actually dismissed by the courts, but Sherry appealed against this decision, and in 2017 the court reversed this dismissal and Sherry was able to file the lawsuit again. Although, really frustratingly, I couldn't actually find what the actual outcome of this lawsuit was online, whether Sherry won her case, whether she and Alicia's family got any kind of compensation. I hope that they did, they deserve to, but yeah, I don't know. So if anyone is able to shed some light on that, please feel free to leave a comment down below. But it was also in the aftermath of her daughter's murder when Sherry set up the Purple Project. The Purple Project is an organisation that Sherry decided to launch to keep both her daughter and her granddaughter's memories alive. It's called the Purple Project because Alicia's favourite colour was purple. In fact, Alicia's friends and family were told that they were not allowed to wear anything with Alicia's face on during the trials or any of the court proceedings, and so instead they decided to all wear purple as a, quote, declaration of love for Alicia. And essentially what the Purple Project does is they offer grief counselling and retreats for parents who have lost a child or children, and they offer both emotional and financial support to single young mothers in need. And they also have this really amazing scheme called baby sponsorships, where they build up a collection of funds and items so that they can sponsor young single mothers for the first year of their baby's life, which is just so sweet and so kind, and what an incredible legacy to Alicia and her baby. As we know, Alicia was going to be a single mother, and I'm sure that an organisation such as this would have made the world of difference to her as she entered motherhood. So yeah, it seems very fitting that this project would be made as a tribute to her, as a legacy. I will leave a link to the Purple Project website in the description box below. You can donate if you want to. They do accept donations in the form of like toys and diapers, baby wipes, etc. But you can also just make a money donation to help fund the amazing work that they do. So I will leave a link to their donation page in the description box too. And that is it for this case. That concludes the heartbreaking case of Alicia Bromfield and her little baby girl, Ava. This is another one of those cases where, to be honest, I don't even know how to sum up my thoughts. Alicia's story is such a devastating one. And again, I know I said this earlier, but it just breaks my heart how alone she must have felt, how her voice was essentially just silenced in the workplace, how no one listened to her. You know, big companies like Home Depot, all companies, all businesses really, have a duty of care to their employers. They have a duty to keep their employers safe, and the fact that Alicia went to them on numerous occasions and told them that she didn't feel safe, that she didn't feel comfortable, and they just didn't really do anything to help her, the fact that they didn't take any action whatsoever is just awful, and it makes me so angry. But yeah, that is it for this case. As always, please do let me know your thoughts and opinions on the case down below in the comments. I would love to hear what you guys think, and also feel free to let me know of any other cases that you would like to see me cover on this channel. They can be solved cases, unsolved cases, serial killer cases, you name it. Again, you can pop them in the comments below, or alternatively you can go through my case request form, which is always linked in my description box. Thank you all so much for watching. Please do give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you again next week for another mystery with Mollie. Bye.